Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing today? Well, today I was thinking I'd talk a little bit about fiber and why it is so important, or at least why I'm thinking it's so important. Am I an authority? No. Do I eat fiber? Yes, I do, more than my fair share. Um, and I think fiber is important for a lot of reasons. So important that I want to devote a little talk to it, a short talk to fiber. Now, I more and more as I grow older, I'm recognizing how important fiber is. Um, fiber, I think fiber fiber is important for a lot of reasons. It sort of grows the microbiome inside of our bellies, and fiber is also necessary for satiety. And I think I want to talk about the power of fiber as it relates to satiety because it's such an important subject. I think what the world is lacking these days, particularly in the realms of food and diet, is a source of satiety. And believe it or not, it's really hard to find sources of satiety, at least in today's modern food environment. And I think partly it has to do with the lack of fiber found in many processed foods. Now, part of the processing for a lot of foods involves removing fiber. In fact, a lot of people do it on purpose. People have juicing machines where they'll put a carrot into the top of the juicer and then out pours carrot juice. And then out of a different chute, will pour all the fiber that was removed from the juice. And, a lot of people celebrate when they see something like this happen, and they praise all of the vitamins and minerals that might be in the juice. Though I've always kind of looked skeptically on that. I know that for many juices, basically juice is very often considered a processed food in and of itself. And I know there have been many health gurus and health agencies talk about juice and how I know they've spoken about how I'm not going to take those positions, certainly. Not that am qualified to take any position at all on juice, but I try to steer away from juice as much as I can now. I used to be a lover of juice just like everybody else, way back in the 1970s and 80s and 90s. I love juice. In fact, some juices I really loved were orange juice and apple juice. Those were great. Grape juice, that was also pretty remarkable. I love that stuff. And I still have a penchant for orange juice. If I can get some freshly squeezed orange juice, I am very happy. Typically, I usually get that only when, I tend to be eating out for breakfast, or maybe going to a grocery store that happens to have an orange juicer machine. But for me, these days, juice is a relatively uncommon thing for me to have in my kitchen, and I pretty much don't drink juice, and I haven't for years. Mostly because I know that I try to drink foods that have as little calories in them as possible. And in fact, if there are 0 calories in a drink, that is ideal. So for me, it's about weight management. But there's so much more to the topic than that. Juice without fiber can allow blood glucose to spike after drinking. Yeah, especially if there's a lot of like fructose or sucrose in the juice. More sucrose, right? Because of the glucose can be a problem. I'm not sure if fructose actually. Oh no, fructose is fructose affects blood sugar that much. I think it may not. It may not necessarily affect blood sugar very much at all, but the glucose certainly does. And I know that's a problem for a lot of people who might have type 2 diabetes, or I just have just are just watching. They may just be watching their glucose levels in their blood, which is a pretty good practice to have anyway. But so I've been aware of problems relating to drinks that have very low levels of fiber for a long, long time. And if I'm going to have a juice of some kind, it will be a blended juice, like a blenders in the grass type drink. Or let's see, what's that restaurant that often has blended juices? Jamba Juice. Yeah. So it'll be something like that where all the fibers are sort of blended into the drink instead of removed, right? Because fibers have, now I'm not going to be able to describe all the benefits of fiber because there are a lot of them. And I just haven't sort of learned about all the details such that I can just rattle them off. And I'll leave that to the other health gurus to do something like that. The only thing I want to do is just re-emphasize how important fiber is, but mainly as a substance that allows for greater satiety. Fiber, I imagine most of it is cellulose, and it's just a substance that is not easily digestible by our gut. And I imagine there might be various kinds of cellulose, say thicker and thinner types. I'm not sure whether that's entirely true or not, but I assume that there are probably types of cellulose that our body at least deals with in a more manageable way. Maybe there's less gas, say, as a result of digesting fibers that are less that are just easier to process. Um, I'm aware of these GLP-1 weight loss aids that people are taking these days. They're pretty popular. Like Ozempic, I think, is one. And quite often, I might have this wrong slightly, but they're GLP-1 agonists, I imagine. That is that they somehow they support increased satiety when you take them. And I am aware that fiber can play or does play a much similar role in sort of eliciting these GLP-1 substances. And I think that's really significant, especially for people who want to eat less, because that really is the critical aspect when it comes to energy balance. Although burning more energy is always ideal, it's as a human being, particularly in modern society, there's no reason for us to, be stepping 100,000, more than 100,000 steps a day. We just don't need to in our modern society. And so, a lot of us, particularly like those in first world nations, maybe we get 5,000 steps a day. We're lucky if we're willing to um, do some exercise and get 10,000 steps a day. That's great for our metabolism. And that's about walking 5 miles a day, which I think is pretty normal and routine for a lot of people. Of course, there are outliers in the Gaussian curve, where I'm sure there are plenty of people who step 20,000 steps a day and maybe even 30,000 steps a day as a matter of habit. But that's not necessarily common, I think, if we're talking about the majority or the median number of people who do it. So my thinking though is that I'm going to generalize a little bit, and I'm going to say that in first world nations, we just necessarily need a few thousand steps and we're good. And that's why it's very important for us to manage the food that we eat, because it's very easy, particularly with processed food, to eat a lot of calories in one sitting. Um, in fact, I mean, if you imagine, say, a donut may have uh, 250 calories, and so 4 donuts, that's 1,000 calories. And if you're talking about an average person, that's half the caloric allowance for a person to eat all day. You know, which is about 2,000 calories a day. So I don't know. It's 4 donuts doesn't seem like a lot to me, but uh, there are people who will just inhale 4 donuts in about 5 minutes, or less time than that, and for 5 minutes, for a person to sort of take in 50% of their daily calories, that's a lot of calories. And I have a feeling that that's about fairly normal. I think someone could easily, in the course of a meal, take in 1,000 calories. And that they may even take in 1,000 calories just for, say, dessert, especially given the size of a lot of desserts these days. So yeah, we really need to start controlling our input. And one of the best ways to control our input is to, have a really strong sense that we are satiated. And I think my hypothesis is that satiation really comes from fiber. And I think it's mostly also a combination of fiber and water. So let's get realistic here. Quite often, if there is any food that we ingest, say like an apple, the apple will be combined with water in the matrix, right? When you bite into an apple matrix, you're getting both fiber and water. The water is an important component of the apple, and that's it's water and fiber in various combinations, which provides a satiety. In fact, apples have a very high level of satiety. Potatoes do, I've heard as well. I think they may even provide the highest level of satiety. And one thing about potatoes is that they have water in them. So eating a cooked potato, um, would involve taking in fiber and water. Yeah, so that's normal unprocessed food, and you know that is the source of satiety. And so I think so. Here's my point. My point is that if a person wants to lose weight, instead of focusing on activity level, which is, I mean, a perfectly fine thing to do, and I certainly encourage that. I think it's more important for a person to start controlling or creating some structure around the foods that they take in, and and probably the easiest way to do that is by taking in lots of foods with lots of fiber and water as part of their sort of matrix. And that sounds like a really reasonable thing to do. In fact, I'm aware of some dietary books. I think I remember a book called Volumetrics that was published a long, long time ago. I did read it many years ago, and a few of the main themes are very indicative of the title, and that is that do your best to strive to eat foods that have lots of fiber and water in them. Lettuce is a great example. And the reason is because, volumetrics talks about, say, how your stomach has a lot of sensors in it, and there are stretch sensors in particular. And when space in your stomach is taken up by fiber and water, that these sensors indicate the distension or the extension of a person's stomach, and at least that's one avenue for feelings of satiety to take hold. And you know that's important. It's important to pay attention to that. It's important. In other words, it's important to eat foods that have relative, since fiber can't be digested. It's important, and water, when digested, doesn't have any calories in it. Essentially, what you're eating when you eat high volume foods is you're eating high or low caloric density foods. That is, foods that are very high in calorie free cellulose and also very high in calorie free water. And it's those those foods that will bring you the greatest amount of satiety. So, what kind of foods are those? Well, we're talking about cabbage, we're talking about lettuce, cauliflower, broccoli. In fact, really, in more or less measure, all of those foods are kind of like leaves. Um, Broccoli, when you eat it, I mean, really, broccoli is just sort of like the crowns of broccoli are a kind of special kind of curled leaf. But then there's like stalks, like woody stalks on broccoli. Cauliflower is very similar. Cauliflower has a very unique, what I'd call leaf, or that brainy substructure that a cauliflower is made out of. I imagine it's a kind of leaf, although I don't have any background in botany to back it up. But there's something about the cauliflower that, well, if it isn't a leaf, it might as well be a leaf, because leaves commonly have a lot of fiber and water. And I believe that the cauliflower, I'm sure, I don't know how to describe the cauliflower leaf all by itself. And it may be that it's maybe it's a whole different botanical language word. I don't really know how to describe the cauliflower itself, but I'm just going to call it a leaf of a certain kind. So broccoli and cauliflower, I'm going to relate those two to be the same. Those are leaves. Cabbage, again, cabbage definitely, it can be categorized as a leaf. Brussels sprouts, definitely leaves. So it's really these leaves. And there are other exceptions, of course, like melons, like gourds, like summer squash and zucchini and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily, those melons, I wouldn't necessarily call the meaty part of those leaves, but I'd probably be more inclined to call them fruit. So I imagine botanists have their own names for squash and zucchini, but I imagine it could possibly be a kind of melon. I guess what I'm just hoping to impress upon you is that the things that you think are leafy are indeed the things that are fibrous, and those things, just by their very nature, will help create greater satiety when you eat. And then I think it's important to eat more of those things. Eat more leaves, eat more green plants, because those fibers will help you limit the amount of food you take in to yourself. And it's really an amazing process. Now, that's really the opposite is true for foods that are highly processed. A lot of take, for example, bread. Bread, at least it used to be true that bread was made with whole wheat flour. But now, I mean, a lot of it is whole wheat these days, but many breads still are not whole wheat. They're white flour, or they're enriched with vitamins, and that's great. But the point is, at least that I'm talking about now, is about fiber and how it's just important to eat as much fiber as we can. And whole wheat sources are actually a pretty good, pretty decent source of fiber. Brown rice is a good source of fiber, probably more so than white rice. Of course, there are other issues to consider. I'm aware of how there are. Oh, excuse me. That there are other issues to pay attention to, certainly as it relates to rice. I think there are other substances that can be found in the ground that the rice grain picks up. But I'm just talking in this short talk about fiber in particular. I think we've all become aware of how these less than digestible fibers, bacteria in our microbiome, sort of take advantage of the presence of those foods, and which are not necessarily nutritive to human beings. We can't break them down, but we have microorganisms that can break down that cellulose. And that's great news for us because when they do, there are often like byproducts, waste products from that process that our body can use. And that's great for us. Of course, it also might also cause us to have a little more gas because, as we feed those biological organisms, they grow. And when they grow, they might also sort of, create gases that, challenge human being digestive systems. Anyway, I think eating as much fiber as we can is important for satiety. And when we do eat the fiber, we have those feelings of satiety. And let's compare that to when we don't have fiber. When we don't have fiber, what happens? Well, we don't have the satiety. So we're hungry. Even though we've eaten food, even though, say, this food is sort of weighted down in our stomach, and we have certain sensors that can detect that food. It's not necessarily as complete as we'd like it to be, certainly. And so when we eat processed foods, we just don't get those really strong signals of satiety. And so what that means is that one piece of processed food is followed by a second piece of processed food, which is next followed by an additional piece of processed food. And because there's so little fiber in these processed foods, there's very little satiety. And we end up eating a lot of these they're basically high energy density foods. And we eat a lot of them. It's causing a lot of people to have problems with weight gain. I think the source of that problem is choosing to eat foods that don't have as much fiber in them as they should. And here's the thing: foods that have lots of fiber and water in them typically have lower calorie density. I think that our human brain is focused on optimizing or increasing the amount of foods that we eat that have glucose, that give us glucose, and that give us high calories, and even have high levels of fat. And in the past, these traits for our eating, these characteristics, were great. They're very advantageous for us because it got us to hone on the high calorie foods because they had lots of glucose or lots of fat. And that was great for our survival because we could sort out very easily what foods we wanted to eat first, so that we can we could continue to survive, and that served us well for a long, long time. But those traits in today's environment are not working out very well for us. We have a lot of obesity and overweight people in our population, and it's a struggle for lots of people. And they're not able to maintain their ideal body weight, and also, of course, what this brings is more and more hunger. So the foods that people do end up eating are just not satisfying. And so they're finding that they need to eat more food. And when they do, they overindulge. And yeah, it's a real tragedy. People feel compelled to eat more, and they eat more of the high calorie density foods, the calorie density foods that have been processed and treated so that they are very palatable. And so yeah, we've got this sort of like this epidemic of excuse me, overweightness. And it's really a tragedy on a lot of levels, because our healthcare system is under strain, trying to take care of the health of all these people who have metabolic type disorders because they just are eating too much food. And so my hypothesis and solution to this is to eat more leaves, eat more fiber and water. And it's actually not that easy to do. I mean, you can do it. People can eat broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage all day long. But one of the problems is because they have such low calorie density, we don't have like strong human desires to eat it. Like what? I mean, we have typically the starter for a meal is a salad quite often. Now, why don't we continue to have salads as second courses, third courses, fourth courses, fifth courses, and sixth courses? I mean, theoretically, one can have a meal that's just salads, 5 different salads. Or if you think about it, water, since water is so important, we could have soups, say, or calorie-free drinks. I mean, I think for some reason there really is no reason why we couldn't have 5 different salads as 5 courses in a meal. We certainly can, and very many people do. They have lots of different kinds of salads, and that's ideal for managing weight and managing energy balance. But it's not something that we crave. I mean, I don't necessarily crave having 5 salads at a time. I much would rather have dessert, like a high calorie, maybe a high fatty or high sugar dessert. I mean, that would be great. There's some who would prefer to have, say, regular steaks at the table, and that satisfies parts of our appetite that are interested in high calories or high fat or high sugar. And when we're confronted with foods that don't have high calories, don't have high fat, and don't have high sugar, we just want them less. I've heard them called like rabbit food by a lot of people. And it's true in that they're not that desirable. It's not desirable to have cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower at every meal. But what it does do is it provides lots of satiety, so that people finish eating, they stop eating, and they don't need anything else. They don't need to go back for seconds or thirds, because they've already had 5 salads and they'll be satisfied for a while, a long time, many hours, very likely. Anyway, I think I'm just going to finish this message with that point about how really, if we could just transition to foods that are both low calorie, high fiber, and high in water, this problem with overweightness that we have in developed nations can, I think, be dealt with adequately. And it's really just a matter of increasing the amount of fiber in our diets, maybe drastically, maybe having 5 different salads for breakfast, five different salads for lunch, and 5 salads for dinner, with relatively low calorie salad dressing, of course. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye bye.